text for today comes from the Gospel according to Matthew, 10th chapter, one verse for us this morning. Everyone, therefore, who acknowledges me, Jesus, before others, I also will acknowledge before my Father in heaven. May God help us as we seek to hear these words in our life for this day and this time. The moment has come. Your name is called. You walk to the front of the room. Person standing there says, put your left hand on the Bible. Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, nothing but the truth. So help you God. Then you're invited to sit down at what we call the witness stand. And you're asked to say your piece. At this point in my life, I've never been a witness. Not in a witness stand. I've testified in a hearing. I told you that story once. But I've been on the jury 3 times. But we think of witness in this way often, that that's somebody who is doing a specific task in court. And honestly, a good number of us, not as many as in the first service, but still a good number of us, have probably been influenced by that process of witnessing by Sergeant Friday as much as anybody. Just the truth, man. Just the facts, ma'am. Just the facts. That's all. Just the facts. When witnessing and swearing to tell the truth is pretty darn iffy. Research has indicated 10 people can see the same thing from the very same angle at the very same time at the very same moment and come up with 12 different stories. And they're all being honest. This is what I saw. I remember thinking one time, if we only had videotape of the incident. But now we have videotape, and folks watch that, and the jury says, oh, we don't think they were beating that guy up. They're innocent. Our telling the truth, our witnessing is influenced by our perception, by our abilities to think and to rationalize, by our emotions, by our experience, by our feeling, by all of the filters that we have, and we say, well, yeah, this is what happened. And then there's that other part of witnessing, and especially when we hear it in church, well, we need you all to get out there and witness this week. And we think, oh, witness. Oh, that means I need to go up to somebody and says, well, dude, are you saved? I hope you are, because I don't want to have to say anymore. But yeah, exactly, yeah. Witnessing on a street corner while I was in seminary, went up to this guy and said, are you saved? He said, oh, I didn't know I was lost. So, that's what we think of witnessing is. Challenging somebody about their faith. That's witnessing. But witnessing can also be speaking up, speaking out, especially on behalf of those who are called the least of these. Well, when I thought about witnessing, I thought of a man by the name of Martin Niemöller, who was a pastor of the Confessing Church in Germany at the time the Nazis came to power. Niemöller says that in the beginning, he really just kind of stood off to the side. He didn't say anything and watched what was happening and sat to the side and didn't say much. He finally did speak up and speak out, and he spent the last 7 years, the Nazis were in power in a concentration camp. He's often quoted with these lines, and that there's a lot of debate over what he actually said. The problem is he never wrote it down. He said it in a lot of different speeches, but this is probably pretty close to what he said. He said, first they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. So witnessing is not simply telling the facts or challenging somebody about their faith or their belief system. Sometimes witnessing is being willing to speak up and speak out, especially for those who are being harmed, injured, or steamrolled by the empire. But there's another piece of witnessing, and this is where we get this whole concept within our faith tradition, and that's from the word used for witness in the Bible. It's actually a simple little word. It's not witness. The word translated witness is martyr. The whole understanding is if you're willing to stand up on behalf of the love of God, especially to the empire, you might lose your life. And if you give your life for standing up for God, for Jesus, the Holy Spirit, then you'll be called a martyr. That's where we get our word for witness. So I've been struggling with this sermon all week. Well, what's new? Struggle with them every week. But I've been posing my question to a lot of people. If the early church, especially when they were being persecuted, had a lot of difficulty in trying to, keep the ranks together, and this whole concept of being martyred, and there was this kind of glorified thing that we still see operating today among religious traditions, that if you're really a faithful person, you're going to give your life for God. And so the question I posed is that if the empire came to you and said, tell me, are you a Christian? Are you a follower of Jesus? Would you say, yes, I am, knowing that you were probably going to be killed? Or would you say, well, no, not really. So you could go on and keep living and maybe offer God's love and grace to a lot of other people. I've enjoyed asking people that question. You don't have to answer, and you may want to say, well, what would you do, John? And I really have no clue, but I have a tendency to think, well, I don't follow Jesus. And then I go on to continue trying to live. I'm just being honest. If it was good enough for the 12 disciples, it's good enough for me. All 12 of them denied him, all right? So what about this witness business? This is pretty heavy-duty stuff, isn't it? Everybody's feeling really, really, really good about now. And, wow. When, in truth, the only thing witnessing really is telling our story. Not somebody else's. Not something that somebody else wants to hear. But witnessing is when you tell your story and when I tell my story. That's all it is. But there's just a little spin on it. When we witness within the context of our faith tradition, that means telling our story about how God has, is, and will move in our lives. And Tracy already modeled that for us this morning, sharing sharing with us how a couple of years ago she heard somehow God saying, why don't you do that? And then listening to that nudge again. I don't know why I've struggled with this so much, and even yet this morning I'm struggling with it, because I thought, well, okay, if I'm going to say to you, witnessing is simply telling your story about how you've experienced and encountered God, then I'd be willing to tell you my story. So here goes. I believe we're all called. I believe we're all called to ministry. I don't think any of us are immune. I think God calls us and claims us to offer God's love in the lives of each other and the world all the time. I think we're all called to ministry. Now, we understand within our United Methodist tradition that there are some calls to specialized forms of ministry. So, I told this story earlier and I even got the date wrong. So if you heard it before, I had the wrong date, I'm sorry. I've been called to ministry, and I've been called to be a pastor thousands of times. I don't want to disillusion anybody, but it's not one and done. I mean, it's over and over again in all sorts of ways. But I did want to tell you about a significant time that I experienced. It was in college. I didn't start out well in college. That little idea that they thought you needed to go to class. I mean, and pay attention and listen. I mean, I never did in high school. I mean, college. So didn't even buy books one semester. Hey, saving money. I thought you were reacting to that, Patrick.
That's my books.
So I had an opportunity given to me to have another chance, and it turned out well. I don't know what flipped the switch for me, but I got really fascinated by psychology. And when I repeated general psychology, that whole thing like going to class, reading the books, yeah. When I repeated general psych, I got really fascinated. And I kind of changed everything. I did a little bit better. And I decided that since I was working at Winfield State Hospital and Training Center as the head of recreation for male section, I was a recreation therapist. That meant I drove a bus a lot of places. I decided I was going to go get my PhD in clinical psychology. Well, it really worked out well. My boss also wanted to go work on his PhD in clinical psych. We were going to go together. We were going to drive to some school in Oklahoma that's orange and get our PhDs together. We had this all planned out. Sometime in the spring of 1969, I was at my parents' house. Nobody was home. And I had some time, and I laid down on their hideous pink couch. Oh. It was, that kind of dusty pink. Oh. And here's where the story gets fuzzy, because I think it was a Guidepost magazine. It could have been another devotional publication, but I think it was Guidepost. And I began reading a story written by a minister who talked about an experience in his life. He said that he had this routine. He'd get up and see everybody off in his family, and he'd drive to the office at the church. And every day on the way he would stop at a little drugstore in a shopping center and buy a pack of gum. Now, I don't know what this was, why he stopped every day. But he said every day he'd buy a pack of gum, and the same young woman waited on him, and they would exchange pleasantries and so forth, and then he'd go on to work. Until one day, he stopped at the grocery store to buy a pack of gum, and she wasn't there. Well, he didn't think anything about it, thought maybe she had the day off, until later in the day, he read the paper. There was a story in the paper that this young woman had committed suicide. And he began to think, I had an encounter with her every day, and did I ever take time to really connect with her? And he began to really struggle with his lack of really paying attention and listening and offering care and compassion to another human being. But rather than spiraling downward into beating himself up or just saying, well, boy, I blew that, that was terrible, that's it, he decided to open a little counseling center in that same shopping center. Found just a little place that he could get, and he continued being a pastor, but he opened up a counseling center that was just a walk-in place where people could come and you say, maybe I missed that one, but maybe I can offer love to somebody else. As I read that story, I don't know whether it was an audible voice or an internal voice, but I heard God speak to me and say, John, this is what I want you to do. So over the next few days, I changed everything. Decided I was called to be a minister. Started looking for seminaries where I could go when I finished college. That call experience has pushed me my entire ministry. I really care for people, but there are a couple of little foibles there. And the first one is, I really don't always do a hot job of it. I mean, I really care, but sometimes I get pretty caught up in me, and that doesn't come across. And then, even worse, I care so much, I get so involved, I decide that it's my job to fix you. And that's really not very helpful, because absolutely every one of you, every human being, has the ability to take care of themselves with God's help. Maybe you need some support, understanding, some guidance, or simply some acceptance, but that's not my job or anybody else's job to fix each other. So in addition to going to seminary, I've got hundreds of hours of academic study and supervision as a counselor, and got certified and everything. Finally, about 25 years ago, I figured out, I can't do that. I wanted to become a full-time counselor, pastoral counselor, but I finally heard God somehow say, John, you're supposed to be a pastor. And so that's what I tried to do. I don't know why it's so darn hard for me to tell you this story, but it is. But I still believe that's my call. To be as open as I can be to offering God's presence and God's love to you and all people. Well, that's a part of my story. But you've got a story too about how God's moved in your life. Not just once, but many times. I advise you to share your story with me. There's not a person here who really would not enjoy hearing your story and your experience of God. And I'm convinced what our world really needs is not us convincing everybody else you need to think and believe the way we do. They simply need to hear our story about God moving in our life. Got a song for us? So this is a time for us to think about, how are you going to tell your story? When are you going to tell it? What are you going to say? And why? Because God is calling all of us again and again and again. That's what it means to witness, to tell our story, God's movement in our life.
The story of love. I love that. Thank you. Thank you for being vulnerable and open to us. I remember as a kid, the first time I realized that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were all the same stinking story. As he was talking about the jury and the witnesses, I thought, in fact, I asked my parents one time, so why do we have 4 different gospels? It's the same story. That makes no sense. It's because we all can share God's love in unique ways. Every single one of us can reach people in our story. But it's not just our story, but it's the capital S story of Christ and what He's done in our lives. Stand with us. We are one in the Spirit.
And they really need to hear our stories, so they can know God's love. So we go in love. God's love goes with us. Amen.